And what's your current employment?
I am a technology manager for Halliburton, Gulf of Mexico region, cementing.
So you did a couple tests with Mr. Quirk.
That's correct.
Now, did you use the actual cement blend that was from the rig for the production casing job?
Those samples were locked up, and we did not touch them.
So apparently you had Mr. Quirk conduct some foam stability contaminated with synthetic oil-based mud.
Yes.
Did he use any of the synthetic oil-based mud from the rig?
No.
So where did he get his materials to use for testing?
We had some synthetic oil-based mud in the lab.
Okay. Did you know it to be the same mud that was provided by, is it M.I. Swaco for this job?
I don't know that it was the same mud at all. It was just a similar mud that was in the lab, synthetic oil-based mud.
Was it of particular weight, 14.17 pounds per gallon?
It says here it's 12.6 pounds per gallon.
Is that the same that was used on the rig for the production casing job?
No, it's not.
Does it matter to you that the mud that you had Mr. Quirk test was much lighter? It was 12.6 pounds per gallon?
In this case, it did not. I was not trying to repeat anything related to Macondo. My only interest here was to take a foam cement, mix it with various concentrations of synthetic oil-based mud, and record the results.
Who at Halliburton told you to run this test?
Nobody told me to.
Just as a matter of curiosity, why wouldn't you test the base cement against the synthetic oil-based mud?
My interest was not in testing the base cement with synthetic oil-based mud. I wanted to see what the effects were of contaminating foam cement with synthetic oil-based mud.
Now, from this then, it appears that there were no additives.
It doesn't list any.
Right. And it would have been pretty important to you to get any additives Mr. Quirk put in it so that you could write it down and preserve that information. Is that fair?
Again, my interest was what happens to a foam cement when you contaminate it with oil-based mud. I didn't really care what the additives were in there.
So you tell me you just had Mr. Quirk mix up something for the sake of general interest, and you weren't intending it to have any particular weight or be given any particular importance. You were just mixing up some stuff.
That's right. From time to time, when I want some information about what might happen, I would call Tim or call the lab. In this case, I called Tim and just ask him to do a test for me. I'd like to get this information.
Right.
It's not associated with a customer. It's a Halliburton internal for information purposes only.
Okay. All right. And so is it fair for me to say you weren't really trying to test the same recipe of cement and additives that had been tested in Duncan?
In this case, that would be correct.
In other words, you weren't trying to say, look, Duncan, you tested it, and the cement you tested in Duncan had settling. It appeared to have problems. Now I'm going to test it with Tim Quirk, and we're going to show that it didn't settle. That wasn't your objective. Is that correct?
We're talking about two different tests.
Two different tests.
This is the foam stability test with synthetic oil-based mud. This was done in August, by the way, much later than the other stuff.
Other stuff being the May test in Duncan.
Yeah.
Considering our detailed discussion of the importance of having the exact same materials for testing, would it be fair for me to say that this exhibit number 807, which we are looking at under tab 64, which you typed up, was not intended by you to be used as a point of comparison with the cement that was tested with additives in your lab before there was an ultimate pumping of that job on the production casing?
Yeah, that'd be a fair statement. It wasn't meant to be a comparison of that at all.
Okay. Now you said you did some other tests with Tim. What were they?
The only other test is the one that I talked about before, the foam stability test.
Did you tell him not to keep any records?
No, I didn't.
Do you know he wrote down on a piece of paper some information and then threw it away?
I didn't know that.
And then you talked about the foam stability. Now that I guess you tried to get samples.
No, again, using lab stock materials.
Okay.
We didn't use anything that had to do with the samples that came from the rig. And my intention there was to have Tim repeat that foam stability test on the last BP lab report.
Mr. Faul, I want to talk to you just a few moments more about the foam stability test that Mr. Quirk conducted after the incident. You asked we've got testimony from today, you asked Mr. Quirk to run this test and that he reported the results to you. What I don't think I've heard from you is what were those results that you got from Mr. Quirk?
I asked him to call me on the phone to give me the results. Basically, he told me he had rerun that test and that the foam stability test looked good. Tim is a very trusted employee. I trusted his opinion to look at the results and just tell me that it was a good foam stability test. I don't recall him giving me any specific numbers. I don't recall asking about it. I was confident that when he told me it was a good test, that he had repeated the previous test, I felt comfortable with that.
So Mr. Quirk didn't report any particular numbers, specific gravity, pounds per gallon, what the difference between the top and bottom of the tests would have been that he conducted?
If he did, I don't remember them.
You took his word for it. The tests looked good.
Yes.
So you did these tests for yourself. Is that my understanding?
I wanted to have a comfort level that we could repeat that test and the results would be okay.
I just want to be clear.
Test foam stability?
Foam stability. To your knowledge, has any individual at Halliburton ever requested that a post-incident test be run on actual rig cement?
To my knowledge, we have not run any test on any of the post-incident cement.
And
It's
I
all
think-
been locked away.
And I think you
Sorry, last part?
It's all been locked up,
away.
yes.
And I think you said this, but I just want to make sure the record is clear that to the extent to the extent anything was used in those tests, it would have been lab stock, correct?
Everything would have been lab stock, cement additives as well.
Just because it's been talked about by different counsel, I just want to make sure we're clear in context. Regarding the foam stability test that you gave, that you requested that Mr. Quirk do, did you ever request or tell Mr. Quirk to throw away any documentation regarding that test?
I don't recall ever telling him that.
Excuse
no.
me, who's the objection? Oh, you, okay. Try to speak up a little bit, please.
Can you?
I didn't get the answer. I was trying to figure out where the...
He said no. Go ahead. You want me to re-ask the question?
I don't recall ever telling Tim to do that. The only thing I remember asking him to do was not to input the results into Viking.
Okay. Do you recall any further communication between you and Mr. Quirk about the presentation of those results?
No, I don't.
Okay. In your job, do you have occasion to request testing from the laboratory that is not sourced through the Viking system?
Yes, I do. As the fact that the lab reports to me, I feel like I have a certain latitude to call and ask him to do testing for me and give me some results, usually simple things.
Did anybody at Halliburton ask you to request that test?
No, I was not requested by anybody to do that.
So why'd you do it?
I just wanted to gain the information.
Okay. Was it informational for your own personal
Yes.
purposes?